Good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. And thank you for inviting me here. I want to talk a little bit about some everyday ways in which we can see each other and see ourselves. We just celebrated Martin Luther King's birthday on Monday. Raise your hand if you did something to commemorate the birthday of Martin Luther King, Dr. Martin Luther King. You did nothing except stay at home because you had a day out? Okay, thank you. What did you end up doing? You served at the Salvation Army. Who else did something? Did anybody participate in a march? Well, you know who Dr. King is, right? You know what he fought for, right? What did he fight for? Civil rights, equality, and justice for some people? For some people? For some people? For all people. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and I want to talk about it through dolls. I want to talk about it through dolls. How many of you were sort of like, what is all that stuff on the stage there? Raise your hand if you're like, what is all that? Is this a rummage sale? Is this a garage sale? What is all that stuff? Well, let me tell you, I have been collecting dolls for 30 years, and I collect dolls because they help teach justice. They help us teach about humanity. And this feels like it's in the spirit not only of what Dr. King talked about in terms of seeing people not for the color of their skin, but the content of their character, then that's what this conversation is about. One of the things that I want to dispel this morning is that Dr. King did not subscribe to something called color blindness. That is when people say, oh, I just see you as a person. I don't see your color. You're just a human being. And Dr. King said, no. He said, in order for us to acknowledge everybody's humanity, we have to see difference. And we have to see skin color. So that's one of the things I want to talk about. And let me talk about that relative through this particular image here. This is a mirror. And when I look in the mirror, I want to see me. When you look into a mirror, I expect you want to see you. Now, keep in mind that all of these things behind me, in one way or another, are mirrors that somebody else has created. So here's an example of a mirror. I'm a professor at ASU, but that's not my name. My name is Neil. That's what my mom and my dad named me, Neil. Can you see this little plate? It's like one of those things you get at souvenirs place. But you know what? This is not my name. You know how I spell my name? N-E-A-L. So when I'm always in those souvenir stores, I'm looking, where's my name? Where is my name? I never find it. You know how that makes me feel? Sad. So I get this one instead. You know what also happens? If I happen to go to a place, not Starbucks, but if I go to a place where I'm going to get a sandwich and they take my order, they put my name on the order so that when the order comes back, they'll say, Neil, but they have to write it down. Guess how they spelled it? It's not me. It's not me. What I'm saying is this is another way that we talk about mirrors of society that don't mirror us. When I see my name spelled correctly, I'm joyous. It doesn't mean I can't survive. It doesn't mean I'm going to lose sleep over it. But it tells me who's valuable and who's not. Okay? Now, I can say, oh, mine is spelled specially. But I know what it's like when I see them all up there. And Jane is up there, and Sue is up there, and Mike is up there, and Joe is up there, and Sally is up there. But it's somebody else's name. So I want to talk about this in terms of mirrors, but mirrors and dolls. So if there is nothing else you remember from this conversation today, here is one thing I want us to say together. The mirrors of society. I want to hear it louder. The mirrors of society. Wait, together. The mirrors of society don't mirror society. Let's put them together. The mirrors of society don't mirror society. So that's what this conversation is about this morning, all right? So let me give you a little bit of history because we talk about Dr. King, we can't talk about Black History Month that's coming up until we talk about a little bit of history. Now, I know there's some people who don't want you to talk about history, but in order to understand who we are and where we are and how we are today, we have to talk about history. Who we are right now has to do with what we experienced as children. The books we were given, the songs that were sung to us, the stories that were read, they all have to do with who we are. So here's a little bit of history. Once upon a time, black folks and white folks couldn't go to school together. We call that segregation. In fact, we had this. These are called Jim Crow signs. And they said, black people over here, white people over there. White water fountain here, black water fountain over here. Does that make any sense? Absolutely not. Black people in the back of the bus, white people in the front of the bus. The bus is going to the same place. Makes no sense. But some people thought we need to do that. And it was not just black people, but it was also Mexicans. And we still have remnants of that today when we segregate, not by choice, but by order legally. All right? So here was a test in the 1940s, a long time ago, where two psychologists decided, well, let's see what segregation means when you don't have black and white people being educated in the same classroom. So they did something called a doll test. And they took exactly two dolls that were exactly the same. They were black psychologists. I'm holding up these dolls that are mostly the same. And they asked these black children, who were probably in 4th or 5th grade, black children now, which one is the pretty doll? And the black children said, this doll. Which one is the nice doll? The black children said, this doll. Which is the doll that adults like? The black children said, this doll. Which is the doll that looks like you? Which is the doll that nobody wants to play with? Which is the ugly doll? And from that, they decided, where are these images and these messages coming from that tell black children and brown children that they are not as good as, that tell black and brown children that they are invisible? And I want to show you these everyday ways in which Dr. King shows us that race really matters. So this notion of trying to pretend we don't see race is like trying to pretend that I don't wear glasses. And you take my glasses away from me and I can't read and I can't see you. So you need to know that I need glasses. If I were in a wheelchair, I don't want you to ignore the fact that I can't get up these steps. You need to find a ramp for me. That is what it means to have a mirror that reflects everybody and not just a few people. So I've got some people on the stage here who are going to help me. How do you move from these dolls to these everyday ways in which these lessons, which I'm going to call about humanity? Now, I want one of my supporters back there to hold up this little banner here with those items on it. Nope, the banner with the, yeah, there we go. So walk up here on the stage. Yep. Because Dr. King is ultimately talking about compassion and empathy and forgiveness. You want to walk across the stage like Vanna White? Yep, there we go. Forgiveness, integrity, kindness, respect, and self-reflection. There's that mirror image again, and self-reflection. Good job. Let's give her a hand. All right. Now, all right, so here are the dolls. Now, once upon a time, all the dolls, and the most famous doll in the world now is still which doll? Barbie. Still the most popular doll in all the world, not just in the US, but all over the world. And Barbie looks like Cinderella, and Barbie looks like, who are these people here? Who are these characters? Elsa and Anna? Yes. Now, one has blonde hair and the other has, is that red hair? What color is that? Orange. But they are still white. They are still white. And there's so many manifestations of whiteness when it comes to dolls. That's why I go on a treasure hunt looking for dolls that look like me, that look like my brown children. And we'll get over here talking about the dolls for boys, because we relegate in this society, boys don't play with dolls, only girls play with dolls. And we don't call the dolls that boys play with dolls, we call them action figures. So already we've got dolls and then we've got action figures. So over here with dolls, what do we do with dolls? Well, we play with their hair. What do we do with dolls? We put makeup on them. And I'm saying for every white doll, you're likely to find something that's not quite a doll. I think this is a bubblegum machine with the M&M. And I'm noticing something very strange about this M&M thing. These arms here and these legs kind of look like white people. I'm not saying they're people. I'm saying there's something about these arms here that remind me that this is not just candy. This is supposed to reflect somebody who doesn't look like me. Now let me show you, because you're not going to believe that. You're like, oh my gosh, you're just finding race in everything. And I'm like, well, it's sort of there. Let me see. Here are the princesses again. I can tell that's Cinderella. Is this Belle? This is Belle, right? From Beauty and the Beast. And who is this? For those in the front. Rapunzel. Now, most of these princesses are white and blonde. And I'm thinking, okay, let me go to a park and I'm going to take one of those pictures and I want to get in there. Oh, look, this skin's color doesn't match mine. And notice that if you're a princess, you got to have blonde hair. I'm remembering a movie called, what was that called with Anne Hathaway? What was that called? Princess Diary. Remember at the very beginning, she's got curly hair, and then she wears glasses, and when she becomes a princess, her hair becomes straight, and she stops wearing glasses. This is what I'm talking about. I can tell you, I went to an amusement park once, and we were all taking pictures, and when I tried to get behind one of these things, you know what I'm talking about, right? There are these things in front of you, and you stick your face in them, but the rest of the body didn't match. And I thought, somebody didn't think about me. They only thought about people who look like this. Even these small things sort of tell you who is valued and who is invisible. Now let me burst a bubble here about representation. And there it is again. It's not just one place. And I'm going to tell you, to me, and it's just to me, that it matches this Winnie here. Now here's what my students get really upset about. Disney, and if there are any Disney fans here, let me see your hands. If you love, love, love Disney. Okay, let me burst a bubble right here, okay? Disney has never been very kind to little girls because it tells little girls that you have to wait on some Prince Charming to rescue you. And you have to be thin and you have to be blonde. And what's interesting about Disney to me is when I was teaching my kids, who are really, really old now, how to zip and button and doing all these things, this was the doll that we used. And I never noticed until we were looking at the dolls that they seemed to have a Caucasian face. I'm thinking, well, mice don't have faces. Well, these do. And look at how these faces match. And if you can come over and assist me holding these up, anyone or all three. Look at that. Do you see a connection between this face and this doll head face? Can you hold up the other one there and you can walk across the stage with them? Yeah. Yep. And this other one here. You can just pick it up on the stand. Yep. Do you see any connections here with these faces? And this is Disney's mice. I'm just saying that these are the ways in which this becomes extremely normalized. And we don't think about this. Does it mean that I can't teach my kid how to zip or button up? Absolutely not. But it means that this mirror does not mirror me. And this mirror does not mirror many of you that I see. And you think, but it's only Disney, it's only a toy. But that's when we start absorbing it, because then we don't start questioning or seeing what we see there. Thank you. Just stay up here. So when I found, for example, you can put them back, when I found this Santa here, and I'm going to ask one of my supporters, and you can bring the mic to them to talk to me about why this was interesting to you. When I found this nutcracker, because we just went through the holiday season, and I'm always looking for stuff that looks like me to validate me, okay? And I found this, and somebody was asking, we was looking at this, and they said, well, this one stood out to me, and I was like, well, why does it stand out to you? Do you want to answer that? There you go.
The complexion is darker.
And? But why is that relevant? You say the complexion is darker.
Because they're all normally really white.
Have you seen brown nutcrackers? You've never seen them?
The first.
See, that's what I'm saying. All you got to do is walk in all those holiday stores or walk into Fry's, and you see all of these giant white Santas and all the angels and all those things. So when I found one that looks like me, I'm like, I'm going to collect these because they validate me. They validate me. They validate other people other than these people who look like that. What else are you going to add to that? Because here's a question I have about this too. Why are all the nutcrackers always men? Why can't we have some girl nutcrackers? Why can't we have that? Does anybody raise that question? Well, you know, I found some of those too. But you have to look for them because that is not the norm. That is not the mirror that society necessarily values. And all we're talking, I don't actually know if people crack nuts on these or not, but they're called nutcracker. What?
I was saying like those might not even crack.
They may not even crack. It doesn't matter. It doesn't. And there's a holiday special out there. It's a ballet. I believe it's called the Nutcracker. How many of you have seen the Nutcracker? Yeah. Who's usually the principal dancer in the Nutcracker? Who's usually the principal dancer in the Nutcracker? Well, any version that you've ever seen. It's usually a prince and a princess. Okay. Is there usually is the Nutcracker usually a color, or the princess usually racialized? Usually white. And here's something I want to add to that about the Nutcracker. Here is an example of a music box that has a little girl whose name is Nia on it. And it sort of reminds us that when we look at certain kinds of sports, certain kinds of dances, they're often very racialized. So when we talk about ballet, for example, we don't find very many black people doing ballet. It's not because they don't want to do it, it's because many of them have been told their bodies are not right for that, because you have to be thin in order. So here, when I found Nia, I'm like, wow, this looks like my daughter now. And so excited she was when she saw something that reflected her. So it's not just about me. And this is an elf. He used to dance, but I played him a little too much over the holidays. This is my little brown elf, because that elf on the shelf is rarely brown. All right? It's always white. Why is he talking about race all the time? Because Dr. King says we have to acknowledge it in order to see what's missing and to acknowledge the humanity of everybody. But everything is not about race. I'm going to point out one other example. Now, you probably know who this is, right? What character this is. It's not Chucky. Raggedy Andy. I left Ann at home. You know what? We know who this is. But have you ever seen this image? It is funny. It is supposed to be funny. In fact, these are the kinds of dolls that were very, very popular for black children and white children back in the early 1900s and well into the 1940s and 50s. This is a doll that's supposed to make you laugh. This doll does not look like a black person. In fact, it's exaggerated so that it gets what you're talking about, the laughing. And that's what I want us to acknowledge also. These things are intended to be funny, because if you can laugh at other people, then it makes us feel better. And Dr. King said that is not acknowledging people's humanity when you make fun of people. That's what this is supposed to do. And notice, this is for children. It has a little rattle in it. Now, if this were given and the doll test and the little black person said, which is the pretty doll, I'm sure they would say this one. Which is the ugly doll, they'd say this one. And let me sort of update that. When white children took the same test, those children, results were exactly the same. This is the ugly doll. this is the pretty doll. And then when brown students took the test, they said the same thing too. So whiteness is everywhere. But I don't want us to be just talking about whiteness. Here's one other example. You see this one? Look at this one. Can you see this one? All right, you see it on the screen there. This is called a topsy-turvy doll. You flip her over, and voila. She's supposed to be the mistress. So here's the slave woman, and here's the mistress. But this is not just about race. What else is it about? Let's move down and talk this way. Let's talk about these pictures. Why do I have these picture frames up here? Can you come help move some of these picture frames? Let's talk about some of these frames here. Talk about some of the frames here. Just pick up anyone and start talking about it. Yeah. They looked at this ahead of time and expressed what they were interested in. Just pick one, just any one. Yeah. And tell us why that's here in this particular collection here. We'll show it to the audience. Yep, hold up there. Yep, and then talk to us about why you think or know that that's why I have this in the collection.
It shows that there are usually only young people.
Can you hold it for him so he can talk? Thank you. There you go. Go ahead. You don't have to be shy. We already practiced this. Go ahead.
It usually only shows males and more white racial colors as
Yeah, hold it up so we can hear you. Yep, you practice this, so you're good. It's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
it shows usually men and only white people.
Okay.
As the main portrayed.
Well, and one of the things we talk about, let's say I want to go find a film, a frame, because I have a picture. People do still frame pictures, even though everything is digital. But people do put things, you'll get your senior pictures when you graduate, or you may get a junior picture or a sophomore picture, and somebody's going to want to put a frame on that. They're not want to just leave it on a hard drive or in a camera. So you'll get a frame and you're like, oh, I'm going to go to Target, I'm going to go to frame, and you run up and you say, oh, okay, I need a 5x7, and you pick up this one. I want to pick up this one right here because I want it to be an 8x10. And I pick this up and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I like the frame, but who are these people in this? And it's not that they have to be people that I know, but once again, somebody has determined who is valued here. And I see this image, it looks like a couple. They don't look like they're necessarily sister and brother, but it's a way in which it's not just about the color, but it's also about, it's also about what?
It says like only boy and girls should be a couple.
Only boys and girls should be a couple. There's not, everybody doesn't necessarily, who's a boy wants to be with a girl, and every girl doesn't necessarily want to be a boy. Or a girl with a girl. And we see that also in this. Because not only am I getting the frame, but somebody's telling me that this is love. And I'm saying, Dr. King would say, people should be able to love whoever they want to love, and we shouldn't pass judgment on those, right? And all of these frames, yes, I can use them, but they're not mirroring me. And I'm going to say this is another example. It's still a frame, but look who's in it. It's Jesus. And I don't know anybody who's actually seen Jesus and come back and describe Jesus. And if you're a believer and you read the Bible, this is not what Jesus looks like. Jesus does not look like Brad Pitt. All right? And we were talking earlier about even the positioning of the people in here. And what did we determine about that? Which is not just about race, but it's also about
who's gaining more attention in like a family household?
who's getting more attention. Who's getting more attention? Who's more valued in society? Look at who's looking directly at the adult here. And the little girl is sort of down here. And we talk about that in terms of inequity. We still talk about women not making as much money as men. We talk about the soccer teams where the women had to fight to make as much as they're making now, which was still not as much as the men, and the women were better. We talk about Brittany Griner, who went to Russia to get more money because she doesn't get as much money as the men get here. So all of these things speak to issues beyond race, but they also include race. Last things we'll talk about here, because we got about 5 more minutes. I want to go swimming and I want to buy a swimming toy. And I go pick up this toy, and the toy has this person floating on it. You can hold it. And the toy has this person floating on it, and the toy has this person floating on it, and the toy has this person floating on it, and the toy has this person floating on it. And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, maybe I'm not intended to float on a toy because they all seem to be people who don't look like me. So then I find one and I'm like, oh my gosh, here's one right here. It shows that a brown person actually floats on a toy. Doesn't mean I can't buy the toy. It means that the mirrors don't mirror me. All right, let's move down to this last section here. Girls play with toys or dolls. Boys play with action figures. Now, there's something very particular about these action figures here. Not only are they racialized again, because we heard that lesson down there, but notice how they're built. Notice how they're built. What message does this send to boys and men about what they should look like? What message does it send to boys and men about what they should look like in order to be real men? Yes?
This shows a message that like boys should always have to wear like superhero suits and they can't wear whatever they want to wear. And they always have to stick to basically the women.
Okay, what else does it show? Go ahead. Yep, go ahead.
It shows that like they're supposed to look masculine.
Well, what does masculine look like though? Masculine looks like this. You got to be in the gym all day, you got to have big muscles, and you got to walk around like you're ready to beat somebody up. That's what it means to be a superhero. And one of the things that we're talking about is how do we open up what these possibilities so we're accepting everybody, whether you look like this or not. What if, for example, you're in a wheelchair? Could you be a superhero? Apparently not. In fact, how many dolls up here have wheelchairs? 1. How many of you have seen a doll in a wheelchair? That's what I'm saying. How many of you see dolls up here with glasses on? How many of you see dolls with crutches? Because we ignore those folks. And then the last thing I want to add to, we talked about race, we talked about heteronormativity, where it's boys and girls. We also talk about young people. Most of these images in these frames are young people. Old people don't matter in this country, apparently. Well, except unless you go to the spirit store, and y'all are going to have senior day, so you're going to dress up like old people and pretend that you're funny. So you're going to get a gray wig, you're going to get a cane, and you're going to get some false teeth. There's some false teeth over here someplace, because that's what old people look like. Well, I'm an old person, I know old people, and they don't all wear glasses and squint, and they don't all say, what, I can't hear you, I can't hear you. And they know how to work on computers. So it's not just about race, it's not just about gender, it's not just about sexuality, and not all old people have false teeth. So think about that if you have senior day around here. And then the other stereotypes, I see one of American Indians here. Why is this a problem? You don't want to do this for your Halloween costume. Why? You're supposed, these are sacred and they have meaning. Pull one up at the spirit store and throw it on your head and go, ah, which is what people do. This is called being respectful of everybody, whether you understand their culture or not. In fact, there's a movement called My Culture Is Not a Costume. And I'm going to show you one more and then we'll have a final comment here. You talked about this one. You want to, because you that one's really funny. You want to tell what you think about it now? Yes, it's making fun of people's bodies, right? It's making fun. And, you know, we think it's funny. I don't know that people who are not built the same way, like a Barbie doll, would necessarily think it funny. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say, oh, if you're going to do Cinco de Mayo, you have to dress up like a Mexican. Well, I know Mexicans, they don't dress like this. Does every Mexican you know wear a poncho? Please don't say yes. Okay? Does every Mexican you know wear a sombrero? Please don't say yes. Okay? These are costumes, and they're costumes made to be funny. And that giant mustache, does every Mexican you know have a giant mustache like that? It's to make fun of. And if anything Dr. King said is, we want to treat people humanely. We want to treat people with humanity. If we're talking about justice for all, we want to talk about everybody. The last thing here before you head out, there's a section over here. And again, remember, all you're going to do is buy a trampoline, but there's got to be somebody on here who's jumping on the trampoline. All right? And always racialized. I want to talk about this last table over here, which is about ableism. Ableism is when we take words that have become part of people's identities and we make jokes out of them. So here's an example. Replacing the toilet paper will not cause brain damage. Now, this is supposed to be funny, but if you know anybody who has had brain damage, it is not funny. But yet we make a joke out of that. Or we make jokes out of things like crazy. Trust your crazy ideas. And once upon a time, crazy represented people who had mental health challenges. What we want to do is be mindful of the language that we use. We want to be mindful of how we describe or deny other people their humanity. So instead of saying, oh my gosh, that's insane, say, wow, that's unreal. Or instead of saying, oh, you're acting psycho, say, you're acting like a jerk. So there are ways that we can change our language to reflect everybody in that mirror. And that's what I want you to recognize as you walk out today. The mirrors of society do what? Let's say it together. Mirrors of society. Let's do it together. We're not going to leave here until we do it together. All right. 1, 2, 3. The mirrors of society do not mirror society. I think we can do that better this last time before you leave. Let's do it. 1, 2, 3 on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. The mirrors of society do not mirror society. You know what we're going to do? I think we're going to make it like this side of the room is going to do the mirrors of society to right here, and then this side of the room do not mirror society. And then I'm going to be happy and I'm going to dismiss you. How about that? Can we do it together? That means you're in the top here too. So that means this side, the mirrors of society, it's like a song. Over here, do not mirror society. 1, 2, 3. Let's reverse it now. All together now. Thank you very, very much. And let's thank our assistants up here as well.